afternoon.
Welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I'm still Robert Winters.
And I'm Judy Nathans.
So this week,
Right.
at the end of the last half hour, we were talking about a little bit about things last week. This week, Judy and I both went to...
And a couple city councilors.
Were there two? Oh, yeah.
Well, Jan Devereaux, I saw Craig Kelly come in later.
All right, let's see what we're talking about first. There was a forum organized by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC, in conjunction with one of the departments, what was it, transportation or urban planning?
Yeah, I have
at MIT. And for those who know MIT, and
sponsored by T4MA, which I guess is the transportation for Massachusetts. That's a separate,
Yeah. So the topic was, it was driverless cars.
Yeah.
What will they change and when?
Yeah.
Right. Which doesn't even open the possibility that we won't have driverless cars in the future. And I think it's fair to say that virtually everybody at this forum spoke very matter-of-factly as though it's coming and coming relatively soon. Is this future where there will be driverless cars everywhere? And I think maybe I'm misreading it a bit, but it almost seemed to be a suggestion that before too long there will be no individual drivers, right?
Right.
There'll be a period of transition.
You won't have to do anything for yourself because everything will be through an app or you just summon it.
And and it's not like anything I say or do is going to particularly affect this future. Yeah. But I was curious about it just because it's not something I really knew so much about. Apparently, automobile manufacturers are very much, there's a lot of money going into this technology. It's not even close to perfected, but the thing is that doesn't stop the future from happening.
Yeah, right. These car companies and these places are doing it. And I guess the municipalities are trying to get on board.
Well, it was even a topic of discussion. There was a city council order a week ago, I think. It was...
on parking garage. Or expanding the parking garage?
Right. I mean, now the truth is the real impetus behind the proposal to modify and put another deck or so on the Green Street parking garage, Central Square. It's not just to, oh boy, we need more parking for more cars. It's that if new buildings are to be built or additional floors are to be built with some additional density and more people, normally you have to build parking, at least some parking, into the premises.
Right. And
whereas one option would be to locate some of the parking to the public garage.
Which sort of makes sense to me.
Yeah. Now you can do planning through wishful thinking that we'll be living in a future where there will be no cars, but the time frame is even if that were to happen.
Cars that you can see, according to some scenarios, they're sent off to these car parks somewhere outside of your vision.
Yeah. So some of the city councilors, I think Councilors Mazin and Devereaux, maybe I'm not sure now. We're speaking like, well, we shouldn't be building any more parking garages. We should just be getting rid of them because they're not going to be privately owned cars anyway. And I thought, well, maybe one day, but I think in the short term, not so. And then another thing that the councilors didn't mention was that if you're going to have driverless cars, you've got to park the cars somewhere. Right. And one thing I didn't realize but the conclusion of virtually everybody at this conference, this forum, was that this particular future is not a future with fewer cars. It's actually a future with more cars and more traffic.
And not necessarily electric vehicles, which sort of is the assumption, we're going to have these driverless cars, they're going to be energy sufficient. Not necessarily.
Right. And the thing is, even if they are using if they're electric vehicles, they still are powered, which means
you have power. You have to have energy.
So unless everything is all renewables and wind and solar, then the power still has to be generated.
We don't have the infrastructure, and what I see is a hybrid thing that's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, but it was interesting. Things. I mean, you do learn something when you go to these forums and conferences. The prediction from the planners. One thing I hadn't really thought about was that right now, one of the real hindrances about owning a car or using a car is the inability to find parking at your destination.
And all the time is spent looking for a parking space, using
Right.
up energy,
So
right?
people will often say, well, I'll just take public transportation because it's too hard to park. Certainly that's a decision I make.
Yeah,
But the thing is, if you have driverless vehicles where basically your car is almost like a taxi.
Yeah.
It just takes you to your destination and then parks itself somewhere, right? Or circles around.
well, she said the extreme version was you're not even in the car. And I didn't get that. It
Well-
does your errand, drops your kids off, goes to the store, picks up your cleaning, and then comes back and gets you to work.
I don't know if I feel all that happy having a
Yeah.
driverless vehicle just.
But
pick up
they had photos of people like lounging in the back seat.
Yeah, it was very futuristic and a little bit science fiction-esque. I'm not in denial about some.
No,
of
I think some of it makes sense if it was for the public good, like
Right.
if you had,
But one other aspect about this, which was mentioned, was that in fact you could actually see a future where more people lived out in the suburbs now, right?
That was scary to me. I
Yeah.
thought of that because now we're going to do the reverse again, which remember
Right.
when the highways got built? Oh, everyone moved to the suburbs because
Yeah.
they can get to work. Now they're moving to the cities, and we're building all this high density stuff. Uh-oh, now we're going to move back to the suburbs. 'cause it's
Driverless
so
cars
easy
actually creates
to-
a built-in incentive
I
for
know.
people to live further out.
of the people that can afford to buy
Yeah,
these cars.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
just like there's a lot of things that have to be worked out.
So I've learned
Yeah.
quite a few things. I
Yeah.
found it to be interesting. Some of the projections and some of the unanticipated consequences
Right.
of it all.
Yes.
People did say how you could eliminate parking. Well, you don't eliminate parking space. You'll have a lane where it's like pausing to drop people and take them off.
Yeah.
And so you could reuse that for other things.
Yeah.
But truth is that you'd actually probably need more travel lanes for the additional vehicles.
Yeah.
Because everybody's moving around in pods. And another thing multiple people point out,
Yeah.
including some people from the city,
Yeah.
quite honestly,
Yeah.
which was that this actually creates a disincentive toward public transportation.
Yes.
So that things like bus lines, rapid transit actually
Yeah.
would be even more just
Right.
disappearing in favor of these sort of individualized vehicular
Yes.
pods.
I'm not
whatnot.
all for that individual thing. I like the idea of using, to transport more than a few people, but anyway, it was interesting, and what surprised me is
Yeah, actually,
Mayor-
let's do just one
What?
little
What?
bit of a
Little-
graphic here.
Oh, yeah, shows you
I-
the little pods
Yeah,
here?
I couldn't find anything
You
online.
can't get this any
is kinda
larger,
small.
right? Yeah.
No, I can't. But it was, one of the graphics that they had was sort of
Yeah.
just illustrating
Here's the bike
these-
lane.
little bike lane, and and every
This is it.
vehicle has these little sensors and.
Oh, so these are these are the vehicles that are driverless?
Yeah, I mean, So they were basically arguing that the
Yeah.
vehicles can actually ride very close to each other. You don't even need traffic
right.
lights in this world because
Oh, gosh,
they can
we'll get rid of the
essentially
traffic.
pass
What
right
about the
through each other.
pedestrians? It senses the pedestrian?
Well, imagine. So.
Except remember the example of the bicyclist that's on
Yeah.
moving his pedals and the sensor didn't know
Yeah,
whether
there's
it was
a way of
moving or
a
not, so
cyclist.
nobody moved.
Cyclists who there's some. I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
I like to be able to take my feet off the pedals
Right,
on
but
the ground, right?
The
But
ones that are in the.
a lot of people, they
yeah.
clip their feet
Right.
into the pedals on a
So they
bike.
have to
and they do
constantly
I think they call
balance
it a track
themselves.
stand or
Yeah.
whatever, where you
Yeah.
just remain stationary. So
Right.
apparently, they actually have this recorded somewhere where
Yeah.
a driverless vehicle sees
Yeah.
a cyclist who's sort of doing a track stand.
It senses the motion.
And it sees the motion, and the
So it won't
car
move.
won't move. But the cyclist just sees a driverless car and
So
says,
it
"Well, I'm
won't
not going to
move.
go."
Yeah.
And they have like this Mexican
So
standoff.
they haven't quite worked that out.
There's a lot of things
Yeah.
they haven't really worked out.
But what was interesting, and the last thing, Joe Curtatone, is that how you pronounce his name?
Mayor Joseph Curtatone.
No, he
from
was one of the
city
speakers,
Somerville.
and they have a partnership with Audi. So
Yeah,
he's getting ahead of the game there.
Joe Curtitown sounded like he was like a pitchman for a car company there,
Well, the Audi's doing
Came
this
across like a used
technology.
car salesman.
And I guess they have got a grant or something. They're working together. So,
I
okay.
think the automobile manufacturers would love to have a future with a
Yeah.
lot more vehicles because
Yes.
they'll be making a lot more product, and they'll probably be owning a lot of that product. And you'll basically be leasing them or just using
I
their
don't know if
services.
you're leasing them, you're gonna be owning them, but.
Well, I think you'll have car companies that'll just own fleets of driverless vehicles, and you just subscribe to the service.
Well, we already are, we talked about this, vehicles that can park themselves. You're in the seat, but then it'll park for you, because MIT is doing, has grants in their aging lab.
Actually, speaking of MIT, I have
Yeah.
to tell you, I hit the lottery today.
Why?
This morning, everybody from MIT got a message this morning.
Yeah.
This was from Executive Vice President and Treasurer Israel Ruiz, announcing a new benefit for all faculty and full-time staff of the city called Access MIT. And I'll just sort of say here straight away, beginning with the new academic year, all Cambridge campus benefits-eligible employees, including people who park cars, will have access to free subway and local bus passes.
Free?
Free.
Not reduced?
Free. Now, unless this was a misprint, and I don't think it is because it says it multiple times here, and the way it's going to be engineered is that my little MIT ID card is going to it'll be replaced this summer. It'll have an embedded chip, so that it will essentially act like a Charlie card.
Wow.
So I'll just use my MIT, and I'll just be able to go to a bus or a subway, and boom, I'm on.
Wow.
I tell you.
So they really are trying to discourage people from. How many people actually take cars in town? Well, I guess people.
Well, they pointed out some interesting things.
Yeah.
Like it's actually very expensive to get a parking pass in one of the structured garages at MIT. It's very expensive.
Well, that was brought up at the meeting about people that actually take public transit to avoid the parking fees, but with the pods would.
Right, but here's the gig. Here's the deal. If you're at MIT and you've just spent a lot of money to get this privilege, you basically want to use it, right? You know. So now what they're going to do is they're going to get rid of the annual parking passes in favor of a per diem. So the thing is that
so is it more expensive?
Well, I think what'll happen then is that there'll be no incentive to drive in. Basically, it'll be free to take public transportation to work, and it'll cost you to park. Whereas if you had, because of convenience or you live out of town, if you currently paid a lot of money, it's like $1,700 or something
for
a year.
For a pass for the year?
For your annual pass. Once you have it, you have no incentive to take public transportation.
Right, so now you pay per diem, so it might be about the same cost, you think?
By the way, there's also a very, very deep discount for commuter rail for people who would come that way as well. So anyway, it was quite a little surprise to wake up to today. So I was thrilled. I mean, hell, I was, in a kind of a weird way, I was looking forward to becoming an old guy, so I would get my discount on the tea.
Yeah, I got that.
Now I got an even better discount now.
You do, as long as you keep working at MIT.
As long as I keep working at MIT, Anyway, it was kind of cool. So so I guess I will have a driverless future, perhaps, because I'll be taking the bus.
But just to get back to that,
Well, actually, I'll be
MIT has deals with lots of car companies dealing with a lot of this technology.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I'm sure that in order to do this benefit for all of its employees, MIT is probably going to write a monumental check to the MBTA to basically to cover the cost of it all. Yeah. Which is probably what I think the MBTA probably says, great, wonderful.
Maybe they want to build on their parking lots. I don't know.
Well, I think they actually do not have an excess supply of parking.
No, so they have to.
So I think this actually works out pretty well.
Either make it more expensive or offer this as a benefit.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of rewards for doing the right thing, maybe we should get into the voting thing.
Oh yeah.
Good segue.
Yeah, so it was.
Is this the first time it came up in City Council?
All right, so let's see. What there were two election-related orders on the City Council agenda for yesterday.
What do you mean election-related?
Well.
Election, how you vote, voting related, okay.
Yeah, so the first one was an order which had sort of come up before, but I think was slightly different. No, the first one was, this had to do with early voting. So apparently.
Oh, right.
state
early polling, or to go to.
Yeah, they
make
call it
more
early
polling
voting. So in other
right.
words, right now, if you could vote a few days early through absentee ballot, or you
Right.
could show up at the
Go into
election
the-
commission,
right,
say
yeah.
if you can't really make it.
Yeah.
So the state mandated an adequate amount of early voting for, I think, up to 11 days prior to election
So the
day.
state mandated that
I believe so.
for any municipality.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And, just to create enough opportunity for people
Right.
to take advantage of this.
Right.
So there was one previous city council order where I think they mandated, I forget how many locations and how many hours
11?
and how many days.
I don't know, it's 11 days. I
Yeah,
don't-
so there was I think a slightly modified version that
Okay.
said there should be five separate locations for early voting for
Every day,
the
for
full
11 days,
maximum
yeah.
11 day, every day for full day.
Yeah,
And
that's a lot.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's too much. And to me, I think ultimately the election commission will come back with a recommendation of
to
what they
modify
feel
that,
is something
yeah.
that can be staffed and which is not, just not going to break the bank.
Right.
Some of this, I think, maybe it was Common Cause gave an estimate about what the daily operational cost for one of these stations would be, which was absurd.
Oh, you saw figures
Oh
for
yeah, they
this?
said, well, this will only cost about $300.
A day?
I think the detail cop, and yes, you do need a detail cop the entire time because
Even
these
though
are
there's no-
ballots.
Ah.
You will have to have a detail cop, and and that's not going to be cheap.
Right.
Plus election workers
Right.
and other staff.
Right.
So ultimately, I don't know what the per precinct is, but if you think I thought about it, it was sort of doing a little back of the envelope about this.
Wait, it would have to be in every precinct? I thought
No.
it just have to be in
No.
certain places around the city.
All right, so here's how it works
Yeah.
today. So
Okay.
now you have, you basically vote on election day, but except for a relatively few, well, some people do absentee ballot, you can do it by mail, whatever.
Well, you
Okay.
can go in early if you
Yeah, and
say
you can do it
think you're going
at
to
the
be
election
around. You're
commission.
allowed to do that.
But there are 33 precincts, and so about 30 locations, because some are doubled. And that runs for, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., so it's a
Right.
13-hour day on election day.
Right.
Plus this little, the
Right.
absentee options and whatever. So that's basically 33 long days, all happening on one day, right? If you were to do 5 locations for 11 days, that's
Yeah,
basically
55.
55 full days, which is more than they do on
Yeah.
election day. I
Yeah.
mean, so in terms of
Yeah.
staffing and costs, it ends up basically more than doubling the costs, I think.
Where is the mail-in option? Is that going to come around like some other
I don't know
places?
I don't know if, I should know these things
Because
because,
to me, that would make a lot more sense to work on.
right, and in places like, is it Oregon?
Oregon
and other
has
places?
it, I think, there's a lot of places
There's
that have it.
there's one problem I have with some of these
Yeah.
systems, which is that, especially in presidential elections, historically,
Mm-hmm.
people, the shifts in voting, or who you're going to vote for, changes often quite rapidly in the days leading up to election day for presidential elections.
Well, then you don't do it. Really? People would
Well-
change their mind in a week?
People do it all the time. I mean, if you do
For
polling,
presidential?
very much in presidential, I don't think that's going to happen this time around.
No, but then
but
they don't mail
it'll
it
be
in. They will, they'll go to their polling place. They have the option, right?
Right.
Or is it either
Right.
or in these places?
Right, but so to me,
it might be either
when
or.
an election takes place, it's more or less now is sort of like a snapshot
Yeah,
today. It's election day.
yeah.
All the campaigns, all the
Yeah.
the political advertising, everything leads up to election day. Everything's sort of timed. You get here now. We all sort of vote today, right? With a few exceptions. The notion about smearing it out over a couple of weeks is kind of goes against that timing. So it does. I think if you had this in a widespread way, you probably change the way you even run your campaigns a little bit to
Yeah.
because if it was if you anticipated a large fraction of people voting earlier,
Yeah.
significantly earlier, you'd have to kind of modify your campaigns a
Yeah.
bit to meet it. So anyway, that was the first of the two orders. It was election related. It was, I think right now it's basically, the order was passed, I think, but there was some discussion about.
What does it mean passed?
Well,
As to
the
what?
city council adopts an order, but that doesn't make it happen.
Oh, okay.
Honestly, to me, the
You
notion that
adopt an order, you pass it and that adopts the order.
it's a directive to the city manager to try and make something happen, but then the city departments have to sort of respond.
Okay, so basically it's saying, what do you think about this city department that affected by
Right.
this? Okay.
Something I found a little
get an opinion back.
strange was this notion about city councilors specifically saying how many locations, how many hours, whatever. That
When they
really,
don't really know anything
it gets
about
down to the
budget and
level of
everything, yeah.
micromanagement. I mean, city council in this form of government is supposed to set policy. It's
Yeah.
not supposed to delineate every last little
But
detail.
would that apply to local elections, which are every 2 years? That's crazy.
Well, I think certainly anything that's a state election, which is every 2 years, would be
Mm-hmm.
governed by this. But I think once the expectation of early
Yeah, it would
voting
be every 2 years.
is around,
Yeah.
my question then, I don't actually know whether that would apply for municipal elections in the future. That may be a decision that can be made locally.
Well, we have absentee ballots, we have
We do
early
absentee
voting,
ballot.
and I think we can expand on some options. I wish
Yeah.
you could register more readily. That's another one that I think is
Oh, I agree.
more.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily in favor of same-day registration.
Even
only-
if it's provisional.
You know, I've always had this concern about elections generally about, the rich get richer. So if you're a very well-funded political campaign, you're going to have a very,
People
very,
get out there to register.
you're going to have an army of people, poll checkers, and you're going to look and say, well, we need to get more people out now.
Yeah.
And you've got the resources, you got the money,
Yeah.
so you go out and you basically shake the trees and,
Yeah.
you register voters on the spot, with the understanding they're going to vote for your candidate.
Yeah,
Whereas if you're just an ordinary candidate who doesn't
Yeah.
have all those resources, you've just
Yeah.
been putting your message out in traditional
Right.
ways, you don't have those advantages.
Right.
So to me, having that kind of same-day registration and sort of insta-voting is really a prescription for big funded, well-funded
in
campaigns.
fact, the places that have that, if that's happened,
I don't know, really.
I might look into that since
Yeah.
we're approaching a big election.
Yeah. I'm just not so convinced that that's such
Yeah.
a necessity either. Access to voting, sure, great, but
But sometimes the
Right.
the
Is the window-
registration cutoff is a lot.
right. I don't think it has
far
to
away
be.
from
I
the
think
election,
I think
that's
the
not
the
good.
current registration deadlines are probably based on a time in the past before.
Yeah, ours aren't too bad. Ours
Right.
are about a month or
I think-
6 weeks before an
Right.
election.
Right now, the
Yeah.
biggest delay is usually if you process it because it's a statewide registered voter database. It has to get processed by the state, and then the
Mm-hmm. Right.
breakdowns happen there so that the local officials don't get word that so and so actually is registered, so they have to
Right. Mm-hmm.
file a provisional ballot and whatever. So anyway, the point is that it doesn't have to be like whatever the current number of days is
Right.
before the election to do this, but you could shorten it, I'm
Yeah.
sure. I'm still not convinced on the same day.
Yeah.
Now, the other one, which I really found ridiculous, is an order sponsored by, I think, 2 city councilors, I'm not sure.
I think McGovern was in that.
Might have
no?
been,
He's
but-
in a lot lot of them, I've noticed.
I think Mark McGovern's trying to make nice with
I do,
people,
I agree
and
with that, because I see his
he's-
name on some that I thought, really?
Councilor
But
McGovern,
anyway,
Vice Mayor McGovern is very much,
I'm not
he wants
showing
to,
any,
he wants to be bipartisan in
opinions.
everything,
Yeah.
so he teams up with people,
Yeah.
that way.
I'll support you on this, you support me on that.
Right.
I mean, it comes through to see
Right,
that.
but, so this is one that basically wants to say that he wants to give a reward
For
for
voting.
voting. So possibly in the form of, if you vote, you get a
Gift card or
little
something.
either that, or you get put into a lottery, and then there's a
Oh,
big
to win a big
prize.
prize, right.
So you win, like.
$10,000, yeah, I read that,
something like
yeah,
that.
you're right.
And I thought, if ever you wanted a prescription to bring out as many uninformed,
Yeah.
superficial voters
Yeah,
as possible, this is exactly
Right.
what you would plan to do.
right.
I mean, you don't offer cash if you want people to vote. You give them a reason to vote. So if you're an elected official or a challenger, you make the case and you
Which is what I
say,
think Craig Kelly tried to say,
Yeah.
it's up to the candidate to get their people out there to vote.
yeah. So I don't know if this
yeah.
is going anywhere or not, but I'm going to just say straight out, I think it's a repulsive idea.
Well, what do you think about compulsory voting?
They do that in Australia,
Right.
and
And some other places, because I did
Yeah.
some research on this when this came up.
yeah, and I think some people take it seriously. some don't. I know one guy, he actually plays with a band called the Hoodoo Gurus.
Yeah.
Right? He was up visiting one time, and he's from Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that's sort of part of the standard there. To me, compulsory voting without a cash reward is relatively value neutral. You're not just sort of saying, "Quick, come and vote. We'll give you money," right? I could warm up to that.
But if you don't vote, you're penalized. And some people say
penalized.
that's not democratic if it's my choice not to vote.
Yeah. I mean, to artificially up your numbers for voter turnout. Let me just say one thing about voter turnout, because especially since I do the statistics and put out information about voter turnout, people who think that, I mean, if you have an abysmal voter turnout, that's kind of a sad statement about democracy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But the problem is not so much voter turnout. It's non-representative turnout. So in other words, if the only people who are voting are people of a certain age demographic or racial demographic, or only from certain neighborhoods,
who look like the candidates they're voting for.
And if other people just gave up and aren't even going there, then you end up with a non-democratic result. It's non-representative. But the truth is, if you had 1,000 people voting in a way that was a really good representation, like a proper sample of the whole population, you'd probably get a very democratic result. The same as if you had 10,000 or 100,000. It's not the raw numbers that matter so much as we want to encourage everybody to vote. It's true. The real tragedy is when you end up with a complete misrepresentation of voting, right? If you think about it, when we elect representatives, so they're out there representative, we have, like on our city council, we have 9 people voting, right? We don't have 110,000 people voting or 60,000 registered voters voting. We have 9 people making decisions, and we're pretty okay with that, right?
It's pretty diverse,
right?
Actually, our city council.
Yeah, pretty much, but probably not a perfect representation
Not enough
either.
women, but hey.
Yeah, I mean, the joke I often make with candidates, I say it is the job of elections officials to have elections be as representative and as democratic as possible. It is, on the other hand, it is the job of the individual candidate to make them as unrepresentative as possible, so that you get a maximum for you and a minimum for the other guy.
That's
right?
terrible. Yeah.
Right. So the goal of a candidate is fundamentally different than those of elections officials, right? You're out for yourself as a candidate, but election officials, their job should be have simply a representative sample of people voting, and together with as large a number as you possibly can. But
that'll be interesting
cash for voting.
So what happened to that? That's also gotten adopted or discussion or?
I think that'll end up. I can't remember if that was referred. I think there'll be some subsequent committee hearings with the neighborhood long-term planning and the civic unity committee.
I think
but really,
referred to a committee.
It should have been sent to government operations. But I think if it did, it would just die there.
Yeah.
So anyway,
okay, so we're coming to the end of this.
Yeah.
segment.
So anyway, we'll see you. Plenty more. One more week from now. See you then. Bye.